Motherhood, but not quite as we imagine. Thought-provoking, refreshing, straightforward, sometimes taboo, often seemingly ordinary, but always honest. Welcome to School for Mothers, opening conversations we all need to have, exploring ways in which you can be fulfilled as a woman, once a mother. Now, here is your host, mother of 10, Danusha Melina Durban.
Hello and welcome to the School for Mothers podcast. I'm Danusha Melina Durban, your host, and today I'm bringing you a conversation I had with Jenna Kutcher. Her book was not long out, and I wanted to ask her a few questions about it, and because I'm what you could call nosy curious about other parts of her life too. Now, she's a New York Times bestselling author of How Are You Really? Host of the #1 marketing podcast, Gold Digger, mum of 2, and a small town Minnesota girl. And of course, she is ever so used to being interviewed. Meanwhile, I also know that she's very into syrupy pancakes. So am I, Jenna. We're on the same page there. Good emails and people carving out a life we don't have to pretend to like. Speaking my language. Oh, and she's been avoiding small talk since 1988. Now, on that topic, listeners, something you won't know is that I don't send out questions to my guests beforehand, because if I do, they come all spruced up and shinily prepared. It all gets a bit stuffy and stiff. That's an understatement, to be honest. Now, after many hundreds of interviews with strangers with personal and business brands that they're shaping and upholding, I'm so much more interested in the behind-the-scenes kind of scrappy stuff than the front of house, pre-rehearsed gloss. Know what I mean? For instance, who knew when I interviewed 80-something, that's 80 plus years, something, Erica Young, megastar feminist author in EP 113 called Edge, that she'd feel it was just the right moment to share about her preferred sex life. I didn't ask her about it, but off she went. Here's a little clip.
I mean, there are people who have to climb Mount Everest and go to the top and die, but they must try. And I think sexually people can be like that. Not everybody. Some people want warm and cuddly, and some people want...
I just got to laugh. That's so
right.
Cute that you said warm and cuddly. Sorry, listeners, if you like
no,
warm and
really,
cuddly.
Some people want warm and cuddly, and some people want adventure and madness.
Yeah, and chaos and sweat and like, ugh. That's
whatever
one version.
Whatever is your need, you're trying to learn who you are.
Yes.
And I have to admit, I've always preferred warm and cuddly.
Oh, Erica.
Whatever my heroines may be my opposite.
Oh, I love you.
Heroines can be your opposite, not your mirror image.
See, even my most famous guests don't get questions before recording, and my conversation with Jenna is no different. When I think back to my interview with her, I'm really not sure if I'm too soft or too hard on her. Sounds a bit kind of harsh on myself, but you be the judge. Would you? It is what it is. Hello, Jenna.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're really welcome. Now, you're something of a sensation. I mean, I know you've got to agree here. And obviously a leader. Now, let's get straight to it. How are you really today?
Oh, today I am so good. I am overlooking Lake Superior in the northernmost part of Minnesota, and it looks like an ocean. And I just feel energized and excited, and I'm really, really excited for our conversation today.
Oh, that sounds a wonderful setting to be having this. I'm quite the opposite, which is I'm in a sweaty recording studio in the UK. And
well, I started my podcast in my closet. So I know exactly how that can feel, but it's more about the message than the method, right?
It is. And, it's such a pleasure to have the opportunity for us to get together, and especially to talk about your wonderful book that I've read from, front to back, from cover to cover. And thank you for that. Now, I was wondering, I'm really curious, what stopped you from calling How Are You Really a memoir?
Oh, that's a great question. What's so interesting, and when I was in the process, I remember there was this day and I asked my publisher, I said, what category is this book going to be in? Because I didn't know what they would categorize it as. And they said self-help. And I remember almost being like, not another self-help book.
Yeah, right.
Because there are so many out there. However, when I really got down to it, I recognized, wait, it is a self-help book, but it's more focused on the self. And what I mean about that, and one of the best compliments I've gotten from a reader is they said, I'm only 7 pages in and I'm starting to hear myself again. I'm starting to hear my own voice again.
Oh.
And there are a lot of stories of mine woven in the book, but it's not from a place of ego. It's a place of, I want my stories to reflect into your life circumstances or times that you've had a shared situation or emotion, or that you felt the way that I felt, and to really think about yourself. And so the subtitle of the book is Living Your Truth One Answer at a Time. And it's not a book to be more like Jenna or to learn about Jenna, but it's a book to invite you to come back.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful description, Jenna, of the distinction between, memoir and self-help, but also that, you're really, it's not meant to be about Jenna and making others Jenna. Because that's totally impossible, isn't it?
Yes. And that was huge for me. It's like, I thought a lot about, Danusha, I thought about my daughters reading it someday and not feeling like they had to be like their mom, but like that they were being invited and called to be themselves. And I loved thinking of it that way.
Yeah, I can understand that. I have 4 daughters and 6 sons, but I have 4 daughters, and I mean, as we know, as daughters ourselves, how hard it is to not look to our mother, to see ourselves as a replica. And that can cause so many challenges and tensions, can't it, between being like them and not wishing to be like them. And, it's really interesting because as I was reading, particularly at the front end of the book, I was reading... I love on page 22 and around there, the life inventory. And it's really great. Yes. Listeners, you've got to go look at that, because you give the readers the chance to kind of journal and really get individual. And I know that sounds, you've just said it, it's living your truth. But there was this piece in the book, quite a few chunky sections where I couldn't help but notice there were loads of we's. And I know that you'll have thought this through so many times, but I felt sometimes I was quite disconnected from those we's and a little uncomfortable because it felt like a device. And I'm thinking, and I'm a writer, I've written 2 books in the last year on parent identity. And I was like, oh, Danusha, I wonder what Jenna was thinking about, what your choice about using the we so much was about as a writer and a woman, because there, of course, there's shared experience. Of course there is. If you think about your description of childhood, for instance, if only my childhood had involved, being at the top of trees and feeling the wind and the breeze. And I love that description. And I'm so thankful that you had that, but I didn't have that, Yeah. So I guess I love the fact that you were thinking about your daughters and that this isn't made for people. This hasn't been written for people to be a replica Jenna. I wonder how we as writers can get around that to stay connected yet have diverse experience. What do you think?
So I did this emotional intelligence training as a team. So we brought in this practitioner for my entire team, and it was just something we wanted to dive in. And most of us are mothers, but we're also, partners and wives and sisters and daughters and all these different roles that we play. And I remember the practitioner saying, you cannot, and you're not meant to walk a mile in someone else's shoes. Like those shoes are for them. They're not for you. And a lot of times we trick ourselves into believing that empathy is walking a mile in someone else's shoes. And she said, everyone's lives and experiences look so different, but one thing we all have in common is shared emotions, right? Like
Yes.
you felt guilt in your life and I felt guilt in my life. And they were probably two very different scenarios. You felt shame or exhilaration or excitement or energy. And so when I used we, I always tried to do it around shared emotions, because even if you didn't have the same experience, you felt that feeling before. And it was such a beautiful thing when I learned that, because there are just certain things in life where I can't imagine that, or I can't fathom going through something like that. But instead of saying, I can't imagine going through that, I can say, I can imagine, because I have an imagination. I can imagine what it would feel like to do that, or to lose someone, or to experience that. I can imagine because I felt those feelings at different points in my own life, and I can imagine what it feels like. And so it was this thoughtful nod of like, yeah, maybe our experiences were different, but the emotions can be shared. And I want for you to think about a time when you maybe felt that way too.
Yeah. So one of the descriptions, as I say, about the childhood was that immense feeling of almost freedom and an exhilaration. It was a sensory
Yes.
description that you gave readers, and so I absolutely see where you're coming from on that. And as I was reading it, that's what it did to me. Partly because, I've been my book on motherhood, Noise, and it's all about the noise and the kind of taken for granted assumptions about what happens once we become mothers, that we will for sure experience and feel. And one of the chapters is about guilt, actually. And I take on those taken for granted because I unpack them and say, well, is that so? Would that be the case if we weren't told that we would experience them? In fact, I talk to mothers who feel guilty that they don't feel guilty.
Yes.
They're not feeling guilty because they actually, in the most typical way, they're feeling guilty because they don't belong to the guilt club in the same way as some other women. So I remember when I was writing that book last year, really trying to not stand in the shoes, because you're absolutely right. We have no hope of doing that. We cannot transcend our lived experiences or our, if you like, structural locations. I'm a white woman, with highly educated, and I cannot pretend, and should not pretend, to be anything other than that. And I grappled with, so it was really, really, I was thankful to you to re-emerge myself in that. And it's great to hear you explain where you were with it and where you are with it. And it's really good. It's really, really fabulous. There was something else you say in the book that really shot out at me, and I really like, and I would love more words from you on it. And it's, you say, almost everything I've ever wanted, I've asked for. When you wanted Drew, for instance, you lent in for a kiss. When you wanted a gig or a project or a client, you pitched like your life depended on it. And I love the story about Caitlin, your first VA, and you surrendering to needing help. I mean, I think that's great. It's such a big lesson, isn't it? And I wonder, I've just touched on it, actually. I wonder how much you take systemic barriers as important and present. For instance, I'm guessing you're not saying that any woman can work out, once she works out what she wants, she can just ask for it. I'm guessing that, Jenna. I'm guessing. Yeah. But so that's why I'm asking you, because I'm like, does Jenna mean that? All you need to do is ask for it, and it happens.
So what I love about the chapters surrounding the one you're talking about is that we meet it with this notion of where the woo meets the work. And here's what I mean by this.
Yeah, I love that.
I remember when I first got my book deal, I asked my publisher, why me? Why this book? And they said, for a lot of driven and ambitious women, it feels like there are two camps right now, and you have to choose one or the other. Our world is so polarizing. This is no different. They said there's either the hustle side, where you just wake up earlier, work more, hustle harder, never say no, always stay on the hamster wheel, or the manifest side. You just simply say what you want and the universe has your back and it will deliver it to you. And they said, you live where the woo meets the work, where you hold these beautiful visions or you have these goals in mind, but you're willing to work towards them. There's actual studies done. I've had some really interesting guests on my own podcast that have talked about is manifestation. The notion behind manifestation is that when you get very clear what you want and you keep reminding yourself of that vision, you will work towards it, right? Like if your why is deep enough, if you are convicted enough, you will be progressing towards it because our human nature is to want to make progress. Mm-hmm. And so in that line of like, I know what I want and I'm going to go after it, that doesn't disregard the work required for it, right? That doesn't say, building a multi-million-dollar company in a decade was easy. And it just says that I was clear on the direction I was going and I was willing to put one foot in front of the other. And so I think that a lot of times these days, it's like we have these visions for ourselves or our lives, or we have these like someday narratives in our head. But when we open our eyes to the reality of here's what I'm doing today, a lot of times they're not aligned. And there's that mismatch of what we say we want versus what we're actually doing. And I think it's where that conviction lives that actually moves us into action so that a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we can say, oh yeah, I wanted that thing and it happened, not by chance or by fate or by luck or because I am a certain way, but because I did the work, failed along the way, put myself out there and took the steps required to get to where I wanted to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's very clear from your book, that kind of combination, that cocktail of where the woo meets the work and the magic of that as you describe it. And actually, I'm really getting at that we're not starting from the same place, are we? Which we're clearly not.
Yes.
I started as an orphan, and so despite being a white privileged woman and being landed in a white, very wealthy family that could afford me some amazing access, etc. Actually, my beginnings were very different, and therefore, I've been very successful, but actually I wonder, that's my combination of things, the very top layer of it. But I wonder about, because I totally get you on the manifestation and the woo and the conviction, the hard work, the focus, I get you on that. And I guess our beginnings and our actual structural locations of where we sit, if we can't get childcare, if we don't have access to money, then, the job can be so much harder to land results, I guess, can't it? And that was what I was wondering where you sit with that, because it's quite, I know it's a loaded discussion, but it's like you've so many pluses.
There's no denying that, and there should be no implication that it'll be easy or the same for anyone. In fact, I think the book is the goal of the book is to just let people's journey be their journey. And no one is denying the act of privilege or ease or how every situation looks different. But whether you inch your way closer to your dream or you leap based off of different things, I talk about in the book how, I think as human beings, we all want to change this world and we all want to live out our truth. And that will look different for every single person. And of course, there are things that are broken in systems that put us in different positions of power or opportunity, or even in different seats at different tables. Yeah. So there's absolutely no denying that. But I think that every person has this invitation, this deep desire to have their life be meaningful and to make a difference. And whether it's in a 5-minute pocket of time that you steal, or if it's in, a 10-hour day at your leisure, I think we're all being called to something more. And I think we all go to sleep at night thinking there might be something more, but it's up to us to define what that more is and how we are able to move towards it.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I really do like about your book that it is an invitation, isn't it? It's an invitational, big, chunky. It's big. It's there's a lot to it. There's loads of stories. There's a lot of strategies in it, and lots of thoughtful insights that actually will help people consider what is right for them through your journey, through your stories. And I think that that's one of the powers of it. It really is. And let's go back to your daughters, let's go to our children. My day job, I call this my night job. My day job is, by this I mean podcasting and writing books, etc. My day job is actually in boardrooms advising powerful leaders, so chief execs, presidents, etc. So it really this question comes from my own questioning around this and my own journey. And I'm wondering how we as leaders ourselves can work on being safe leaders for women by making sure that we partner with people who aren't harmful to women in any ways. And why I say that is because I've really had to grapple with kind of difficult decisions about, I work with a great deal of men and masculinist, if you like. They're huge organizations. The client list is very, a prestigious list. And I'm therefore party to and partnering with organizations that aren't necessarily always lacking harm. And it's something that I've had to look at. And I wondered how it's been a tricky few years for some of us women. I'm not on social media like you. Mine's in, as I say, in organizations, but it's been tricky. And it was something that really hit me as I was reading the book. So how are you working on being a safe leader? We're going to need to be for our children, aren't we? Our girls are. Yes. We need to make,
it's really interesting. They always say never meet your hero, right? In the sense of a lot of leaders have personas, or they are certain people in one context of their identity and a totally different person off stage or behind the scenes or whatever that looks like. And I always just ask myself, how can I inspire the right kind of change? How can I, if I'm finding myself in a seat at tables that I never imagined being at, what am I bringing to the conversation that challenges the way things have been done? I think it would be crazy for us to not see. There's a line in the book about our culture is so obsessed with learning, but I think what we really need to do is unlearn. There's a line that says even the history books got a lot wrong, and we're learning that. And what's super interesting for me is that generationally, a lot of times the places that I find myself in the context of business, I'm young enough to be some of these people's child.
Yes.
A lot of my peers, quote unquote, in the business world are the age of my parents. And so I bring a different generational impact, but I also bring a different energy to the room that really challenges the way things have been done and asks, is this the right way? Or is this the appropriate way? Or is this the best way to make a difference? And in that way too, I am also sometimes challenged. There are sometimes blind spots where it's this is why it's done this way. And this is how, it does make a difference. So it's very interesting, Danusha, because there are, so many layers to the world that we find ourselves in. And there are so many places where I think, I constantly just have to come back to, I'm the kind of person where if somebody enters the room, I feel an energy, either good or bad.
Yes.
And I have to trust that in myself. And I think too, as a woman in business, a lot of times I have to recognize that I am not here to be saved by anyone. I am here to live out the best version of me and bring my gifts to the table. And I want to make sure that I'm at tables that are doing good in the world.
Yes.
And so it's very interesting. I think that's a really great question. And I think too, it's something that a lot of people don't know about or think about when it comes to things like accountability or ethics or
integrity.
How do we hold people to the standard that we want in the world, especially when we're not the person pulling the strings, so to speak.
Yes, exactly. And as we create futures for our children, both, male and female and non-binary, who actually, we want that future world to be better than the place that we're navigating right now that has become very tricky and disempowering for a lot of people.
For me too, it's like, if I want people to see themselves reflected in the different versions of success being put out into the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think for so long we were shown one way of success, or success looks a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's important to, when you're looking around the table, like, are there people who have different experiences than you, that look different than you, that bring a different perspective to the table? And if not, how do you either invite them into the room or exit that room? And what does that look like? And I think that's a beautiful challenge for all of us.
Totally. And also when we find ourselves sitting at seats at tables that don't align or challenge so radically what we're here for, that actually we make decisions about maybe not retaining that seat. Sometimes we have to give up that seat because it's not good for us and actually not good for our mission in that change that we know we're here for. I have a last question for you. It's light. It's a kind of, it's a slightly daft one, but there's this delightful piece when you talk about, you describe your dad's mowing an immaculate yard when you were growing up, and how you hated raking as a chore. And as a working mum, I wondered what your 2 top chores are that you hate.
You want it?
Yes.
It's so funny. So my daughter Coco is 3.5, and every single Saturday for years we've done a mommy Coco date. It's just this like time together. It's this really focused, intentional time. And we started going to this new coffee shop, and there's this beautiful shop attached to it, and it has like these really beautiful jewelry for her expensive taste. I'm like, dang it. And so we've had to start giving her chore charts to earn quarters to put towards what she wants to save for. And it just brings me back to those days. And so one of them is emptying the diaper bin, like the pail.
Mm-hmm.
I hate that.
Oh, that's a horrid one.
And the second one I would have to say is cleaning up the dog mess, wherever that is, mostly in the yard. I think it's yard things. I just don't really like that. My husband is really good at both of those things.
But
thank the Lord for him.
The connection is the poop, the shit.
Don't like it.
You just don't like the shit, and
I can't get behind it.
Yeah, and it's really funny because when I was reading your life inventory, I was like, there is only one negative question on here, and it's not that they're positive, negative. It was just like. Positive facing.
What do I not want to do any longer? Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So it kind of says a lot about you.
Yes, it really does.
Yes.
It really does.
Oh, Jenna, this has been an absolute pleasure. It really has. And, I'll obviously be sharing how to get hold of your book and obviously more about you anyway, if by chance listeners haven't learned about you. But quite honestly, I would expect they already know about you. So let's, thank you so much. It's been great. It's been really good.
Oh, Danusha, you are amazing. So you can find out more about me at jennakutcher.com. That is the home on the web that leads you to all of the places. I'm the host of the Gold Digger podcast. So if you are entrepreneurial or love marketing and strategy, we talk about how you can work smarter to get back to life. So it's more about how to unlock a life that feels good and doesn't just look good. And then, of course, you can grab my book, How Are You Really, anywhere books are sold, or go to howareyourreallybook.com. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you. I'm sure our paths will cross again. So
absolutely. Maybe it'll be at a table that we love being at together. That would be awesome.
Exactly. Jenna was a great sport. Write to me on hello@schoolformothers.com and tell me what you think. I'd love to know. That's hello@schoolformothers.com. Now, next episode is going to be something very different. I've had to work up to this. I'm getting myself together to tell the story about the one and only episode I ever recorded that I was just too scared to publish. That's right. There's one episode that I recorded but didn't release. It's with someone, I am 99.9% sure about that, and I'm pretty sure you'll have strong opinions about her. I'm not going to spoil it by saying exactly who it is or even to give you any clues. But let's just say she's a polarizing voice in the UK, which is why I'm calling the next episode the episode I was too afraid to publish. I really hope you'll join me. Until then, take care.
Thank you for tuning in to the School for Mothers podcast. To continue the conversation and keep your dose of inspiration up, head over to schoolformothers.com/podcast, where you'll find bonus content from Danusha and her guests on habits, recommendations, books, best apps, time-saving secrets, life hacks, health, sleep and anything in between. That's schoolformothers.com/podcast.